Very, very quickly. They are in this document, the one that we're most interested in, which is the WCAG, or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. In this guideline, they have basically 3 levels or 3 tiers that you can meet as a business. Basically, there's what we call priority 1, or level A, which are all the things that as a designer you should do to a website to make it accessible. The things you must do to a website. Then there's level 2, which are the things that you should do, and then there are level 3, the things that you should maybe do, which will make the sites more accessible. All 3 levels are quite difficult to achieve. Now, what a lot of people tend to do is they look at these levels and say, right, let us try and meet all of these criteria. Let's meet all these checkpoints. And they treat it very much as a box-ticking exercise, which you shouldn't do. You should actually approach accessibility as kind of a mindset, a total way of thinking when you're actually creating sites from scratch. One of the hardest things to do is actually go back retrospectively to a site and try to make it accessible, especially if the people who created the site had no idea of accessibility in the first place. You still always require, most of the time, testing and auditing of a site, working through a site, making sure it's accessible. The European Union, well, some people don't like the European Union, but basically the European Union are laying out a guideline that we should recommend level 2 to most UK or most European governments. Level 2 is a guideline for us to try to achieve. So they are basically a certain set of checkpoints that we should try to go through on our website to achieve, to make our sites a little bit more accessible. Okay, from my point of view, layman's terms, what are the things that make sites inaccessible? For me, the blurring of design and content, putting images in that aren't necessarily content into your HTML or your XHTML, and putting content into your design elements. A lot of websites are becoming very, very, very unnecessarily graphically intensive. Lots of images, lots of backgrounds, and that sort of thing, making sites a lot more difficult to read, a lot more difficult to access, in some cases inaccessible totally from certain devices. Uses of technologies, certain technologies that can also be inaccessible. The old Java, not JavaScript, but the old Java. Some JavaScript as well, but using things like old versions of Flash can be inaccessible as well. Sorry? No.
I think you just what you wanted.
Yeah. Okay. Over-reliance on graphics, making your navigation too complicated. Hundreds and hundreds of pop-down menus, pop-out menus, fly-out menus, that sort of thing. Making things overly complicated can also make sites inaccessible, especially if you're not providing an alternative way of navigating around the site. Using lots and lots of unnecessary video and audio content, and not providing transcripts and not providing closed captions and that sort of thing with that technology. Also, just making videos generally inaccessible, not able to play those through players that aren't accessible in the first place. The Flash video players, YouTube player, and that sort of thing are accessible. And then just general bad web design, bad designs, bad usability, that sort of thing can make sites very, very inaccessible. Okay, I was told, how are we doing for time? I was told basically to create a list of 5 things. If I'm going to say to you, right, as businesses, what you want to do is to test your sites, go away and try to decide whether they are accessible or inaccessible, and try to implement something that will make them more accessible. One of the things I would say, the first thing you want to do is go to your websites, identify the services that you provide. One of the things I do on the course is say, right, go to your site, have a look, what are the key services that your website is providing? So if you look at the axiscentre website, the key services we provide. One, we're giving information about the courses. So one of the services that we need to make accessible is that the information about our courses are accessible, so that users can find out what times the courses start, how much the courses cost, when the courses are on, information about the courses, the course requirements, that sort of thing. So information about courses is one of the services we offer. Booking courses. Being able to book a place online is probably our second service. Then, being able to contact somebody at Access and ask them a question, third service. So if you think about your businesses, what are the services you provide? Is it just information? Are you providing an online booking service? Are you providing an e-commerce solution? Are you providing a content management system in the back end that needs to be accessible as well? So what are those services that your website's actually currently providing? The second thing I'd say to make your sites more accessible is actually test your sites using just a keyboard. Okay? Throw the mouse off the desk, go in and navigate around your site and test those services that you've identified here using just the keyboard. A lot of users that use assistive technologies use devices that are quite similar to keyboards or actually use keyboards and don't use the mouse to get around websites. Are all the services that you've listed actually accessible? Can you actually get to those services and use those services using just the keyboard? So tabbing around, pressing enter, using any shortcut keys you might know to get around the site. That's one of the first things I would do to try to see whether a site is reasonably accessible. Then check to make sure that all of your images have proper alternative text. Now, that doesn't mean writing paragraphs and paragraphs of keyword-rich content into an image just because you feel like it. It means actually describing the image as briefly as possible, using the fewest amount of words possible in your alt text, and making sure that the words you're describing actually needs to be described. Some images that you have on a website are there purely for decorative purposes. They don't need an alt text. They need to have the alt attribute in the image, but they don't necessarily need to have any alt text associated with them. Okay, I won't go any further into that than that. Then also making sure that you are using CSS and HTML, XHTML to divide up your content from your presentation. Making sure that you have something that has just the content semantically marked up and your presentation separately in a CSS file. And then finally, probably one of the key ones, don't overdo it. A lot of people tend to go in and put what we call title attributes on everything. Put alt tags on everything. Go in and put alternative links and all kinds of additional content in just to try and make a site more accessible. A lot of the times you're actually making the site less accessible. You're putting more unnecessary content in the way of a user that's maybe not able to see the site. So they're actually having to browse through a lot of extra code that doesn't necessarily need to be there. A lot of people actually don't realize that things like screen readers, a piece of software that actually reads out the content on the site, they are quite advanced pieces of software. They are able to navigate through a site and actually identify parts of a site automatically. They don't need a lot of this additional accessibility we put on. So don't overdo it when it comes to accessibility. So those, for me, are the 5 key things that businesses should probably look at first off